Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Michelle Rook with Joe Koima with Koima Varlick, and we're seeing a lot of red on the board this morning, is set for the wheat market. And Joe, let's talk a little bit about cattle. We've had some back and forth action already here this morning, but we made new highs for the move there, and now are we consolidating, or what is the market looking tired? What do you think?
Well, it's a great question. Thanks for having me on today as well. I would say the cattle market right now it's a tough trading situation right now. Last week we ventured into a very overbought status on the charts, and that happened or appeared on Tuesday, Wednesday. But you kind of had to wait for cash to develop, and we got cash better than the week prior, especially in the South. And that was the momentum to kind of finish off the week. But later on Friday, some of the cash market basically just stopped. The Packers weren't interested in a whole lot more. And that's when the market started to taper off just a little bit. So I think just from the chart perspective, to keep a market healthy, we should have some type of a setback. October, I don't think would be prone to it, but anything in the back there is going to be prone to a setback. And I think having a $2 or $3 pullback here is just going to be more fine than anything. But we're usually kind of getting a better Monday rally to kind of sell into, and we're just not seeing that there today. So we're definitely tired. We need to have a kind of an encore type of a setup to maybe finish off the last little part of this. But cash calls this week, I would say we're fine supply wise up here in the north. The South can be a little bit of the wild card depending on if they're going to look at some formula type cattle, if they're going to pull into those yet or not. But the market's certainly acting tired here. If a guy's needs a little bit of a reason to hedge, I'd point out June's getting close to this 180 mark is a pretty good ticket for right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you expect that we're, first of a new month, we do start pulling formula cattle. So you think the cash trade will be okay here this week, even in light of that?
I think in the north, we can still dig our heels in just a little bit, but having the Packers kind of shut off things on Friday, and I know that they're always up to something here, and the footing is back in the feed yard, the feedlot guy right now, so they're going to try to wiggle themselves a little bit of more leverage here moving forward. But they first have to capture that leverage this week, but they're up to something right now, and the weights are always going to be an issue, not necessarily an issue, but just something to look at here. And that's kind of the first little warning side a guy has to look at.
Well, and you don't want to read too much into the futures today from the perspective of it is end of the month, end of the quarter. And sometimes we just get some profit taking and then quickly go on after that. So we could get a correction pretty easily today, don't you think?
Right. And it's kind of, when these end of the quarters, when they end up like in the middle of the week, like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there's more volume to kind of go off of. And sometimes when you have them on a Thursday, Friday, and then a Monday, it makes it even more difficult to go or not, just to figure out what they are doing with it. But I would imagine, we got a few hours left here in the trade, that a lot can happen here where we can have a quick correction just happen on a Monday too.
You bet. The elephant in the room is still these weights up again last week, right? On cattle here on a dress basis and live.
Yep. It's something we're keeping an eye on. I'm never going to ignore it. Part of me wants to really just kind of just completely ignore it and kick it down the road a little bit, because the supply issue up here in the north, where it's just not there at all. I think this year we've just had a tremendous weather for growing these cattle and the conditions just to keep this weight going on. But I don't want to ignore it completely, but looking at our backyard around here, is just the supply is not there, and that's certainly trumping this weight data. And it's not like it's just jumped up the last 2 weeks. I mean, the whole year we've been keeping an eye on that, but certainly the supply issue up here is definitely trumping that big time.
Yeah. All right. Hogs have already been two-sided this morning. We expect that in maybe both cattle and hogs here today to trade on both sides. But the hog market, man, the funds have really pushed the long side of this market. We had our first lower weekly close this last week. Do you think the funds are done buying here?
It feels that way a little bit. It's always tough to trade these hogs, but if you look at a chart and you've kind of find these moves, this 8 $10-12 move in these hogs is kind of very typical to have happen. And we got a $10 one off of our lows. The cutout hangs in there really well. I think that's why the funds were kind of stepping on that market on the gas a little bit, but this cash is starting to leak just a little bit, and we've had a good move, very overbought, got a little sloppy there at the end of the week last week, so this might be difficult for them to really push too much more. You almost have to make a new high to attract the funds, and if we start taking out some last week's lows, I don't think they'd be too afraid to get out, because this cash market definitely hit a little bit of a road bump last week.
Yeah, no doubt. We have shook off the Hogs and Pigs report quite well. I mean, most of it came in within expectations, except for the marketing numbers. Those weights, 120 and above, man, they were way above expectations, weren't they?
Yeah, they were huge. That was a surprise. The one thing about the weight class of the 180 and over, typically, 50% of them are dead by the time this report comes out. But that 120 to 180 certainly is going to look a little burdensome. And then you pull up all your historics and your seasonal type stuff, and that big letdown in cash on Friday. Usually we do start slipping here aggressively, and that report certainly isn't going to help out to maybe shake off that thought process with the fourth quarter hogs.
Yeah. And do you anticipate that the numbers are going to exceed shackle space or get pretty close in there as we get into the next month or two?
That would be the worry. That's a great question with that Perry plant closing in the middle of the summer. If we do start coming up on just a little bit more supply on the kill, that's going to aggressively make these weights a little bit bigger as well. So that is something that I'm worried about here moving forward as well. But a great question there to bring that up again, because it's a fine line with the hogs too, especially if you drop a plant like that and all of a sudden we come up on just a little bit more numbers, you're going to back up those hogs in a quick fashion.
And I want to ask you as well about the possible port strike in the East Coast and the Gulf Coast. It impacts containerized meat shipments. Do you think that the market is concerned about it right now, either pork or beef?
Yep. Last week we were kind of wondering about that too. And I think there's a little bit of an onset with that sell-off, but we captured ourselves a little bit. Makes it interesting to have the port strike in that part of the nation. Because anytime you hear port strike, it seems like the first thing affected is the hogs. But that's if we have them more on the West Coast, because that's your life vein to China to put all them hogs there with it. But having Mexico as a big supplier now of our exports, and I know they're going to truck a lot of it down there, but I'm sure some probably go on a container too, just to go down in some areas there too. But it's shaking it off pretty good right now. I think we're going to figure out a lot more after the effect of this port strike there. It just doesn't seem like it's directly related to the pork. If it were on the Pacific Northwest and all that type of stuff, I would imagine that this hogs would have been down about $5 or $6 since that announcement.
Yeah. And the grains were mixed right now. The soybean market has come well off its lows. It's been very resilient as the funds have been covering shorts. Unless we get some sort of a huge surprise in the quarterly stocks reports today, do you think the funds just keep covering their shorts in these grain markets?
It's a great question. These charts look good enough that these funds will not be afraid to continue to chuck out some of their short positions that they have on, granting no surprise with this report out at 11 o'clock. Historically, the surprises in this market is more corn related than anything. But with this solid demand that we've had the last 6, 7, 8 weeks for both corn and soybeans, I would kind of expect to maybe see those numbers drop back on the ending stocks to a certain notation. So that would potentially what I'm looking at the 11 o'clock report. But typically we get a report and we move on to the next thing. And I think the driver behind most of this is more South America and the weather that they're enduring through right now. So I think it's just back to the typical weather, but this is just going to be in a different country for weather to look forward to.
Yeah, and Brazil doesn't look like they're going to get any great or meaningful rainfall here for a couple weeks yet, do they?
Right now, this morning, I did come across a chance of rain in like the 10 to 12 day outlook, and that's typically what the market does trade off of. But now it's more like, okay, we see it in the forecast. Now prove it to me that we're going to see some rainfall there. So that's why this market maybe had a little shakeup here today, just to pull back off of that. But if that doesn't come to fruition at all, these funds got more positions that they have to move out here if that's the case.
Yeah. One last question for you, Joe. We've been throwing a lot of money, or China has been throwing a lot of stimulus money at their economy. The hope is that we're going to see increased demand. Do you see it either for grains or meats?
Yeah, I guess, looking at that, they've had huge move since last week, Thursday, Friday, on that big stimulus type stuff. We know maybe some of the stuff they throw at their own market is a little bit. Can you trust them or not? I'd be in the camp if we're looking at maybe getting some hog exports to them. Just doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Their pork prices have dropped tremendously here the last little bit. But as far as grains go, I think this is definitely going to offer a little bit of underlying support if we do have a surprise in the 11 o'clock report this morning that we can maybe reflect on China and see if their stock market's still doing what it is.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Joe Khoima with Khoima Varlik. That is Markets Now.